One of Lorraine's great qualities is her overall feeling, which goes beyond her playing. When she's backing up a soloist, she's very good about getting a unanimous feeling, not playing so much as to inhibit anybody, but just the right amount.
And you said you wanted to expand on that. Why don't you just, I'm not going to use that in the radio production, but just go ahead and expand on it if you want it. That's
Yeah.
a place to start.
Yeah, she had a great time feeling, a great beat. She swung, and she swung with the whole group. Loose and positive. And she was very positive as a person. As I said, it went beyond her playing. It was fun to be with her. She was really a good friend. Totally honest, totally open. In the group that we had, the quartet, with James Clay, James was always super serious and doubted his own ability, even though he played fantastic. He still does. He was always very serious. Billy Higgins was always having fun. He could make the cymbals smile even then. And between Billy and James and Lorraine and I used to just kind of giggle, and it always felt good. She was both bright as a soloist and supportive as an accompanist. And she was kind of the spark plug in our group.
Why did you choose? You probably could have a number of piano players. This is your second album under your own name?
This was my third. The first one was a 10-inch album on Bethlehem, featuring Conti Candoli, Bob Brookmeyer, and Zoot Sims, Stan Levy, and Claude Williamson. The second one was on, I think it was Mode, if I'm not mistaken. Just had my name on the front and a whole lot of basses. It was featuring Hampton Hawes and Chuck Thompson, Conti Candoli, and Joe Maney, and myself. And this was the third one, presenting Red Mitchell.
Did you want her above all piano players?
Yes, I did. It was partly the fact that we had a working group for a couple of years there, and we had a kind of a group togetherness that you can't just get by walking into a studio together. But there was a reason I chose her, and it was funny, because I worked with Herb and her when it was their gig, and we would either have Billy Higgins or Richie Frost on drums, and it was always fun. And then one thing that mystified me was when Herb would get a heavy gig, like a recording or a serious jazz gig, he would hire Russ Freeman instead of Lorraine. And that always mystified me, because I always preferred Lorraine. I don't know whether you should go into print with that, because Russ is still alive and Lorraine's gone. But that was my taste at the time, and I never understood Herb's taste in that matter.
Maybe he didn't want to think he was favoring his wife or something.
Maybe, yeah, he was afraid of being accused of being a nepotist or something. I don't know. But I don't think so. I think it was his taste in jazz, which is different than my taste in jazz.
Whose style did she remind you of? What did you hear in her that you could tell what she was listening to, for instance?
I don't know if it came from her original influences. I don't think it did, but there was something about her sound, the warmth of her sound, and the loose time feeling, the beat that she got, that reminded me of Red Garland. But she was already playing that way before any of us heard Red Garland, I believe.
When I hear Red Garland, I'm thinking about those upper register kind of bell-like chords that
Well, okay, I was thinking more or less of her overall time feeling, her
okay.
beat. She had a loose swing that Red Garland also had in Miles' group.
How did you want to talk a little bit about how you met her, and you said that Herb and she had done quite a bit for your career, or that.
That's right. Yeah, we met first in 1952 in Rudy Van Gelder's house in Hackensack, New Jersey.
Now there's a good engineer.
Yes, right. And he's just gotten better and better since then. He's fantastic now. And I think we played together. I don't remember exactly what the circumstances were, but I do remember that's where Herb and Lorraine and I all met. And then 3 years later, the beginning of '55 when I decided to put my card in Los Angeles, put in my transfer. Herb and Lorraine helped to save my life at that time. There was a rule the union had then, which has since been declared unconstitutional, or at least against the Taft-Hartley law. They had a lot of rules which have since been thrown out. This was one of them, that when you decided to move to a large city, you couldn't work a steady gig for the first 3 months, or even an off night in a club that had a steady band. And at the same time, to do a recording, I used to have to ask the union for permission to do it, even though they had no jurisdiction whatsoever over interstate commerce, which is what recording was all about. I could go on about the union for hours, but I won't distract from the subject of Lorraine by doing that. Herb and Lorraine saved my life by risking their union cards. At that time, the union owned our union cards. It said on the card, this card is the property of the American Federation of Musicians. And what it meant was they could tear it up at any time and you'd be through.
Work, huh?
That would be it. As a musician, your career would be over. They risked their union cards by using me Sundays and Tuesdays at a place called Zardy's in Hollywood, which did have a steady band. And even that was considered a steady gig. So if they'd have gotten caught, they'd have been in big trouble. But I will never stop thanking them for that. And the idea was it was billed as jam sessions, Sunday afternoon, Tuesday night jam sessions. But Lorraine, in particular, Herb also, but particularly Lorraine, she was stronger about it than Herb was. She just wanted to play with our quartet and not have a lot of people sitting in. And so they
when you say she was stronger, you mean she was...
I remember
she
her...
resisted people sitting in?
Yeah, I remember Herb asking her one time, would you mind if so-and-so sits in on flugelhorn? And she said, no, 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 1,000 times no, from the piano, so that everybody could hear it. She wanted the quartet, and that was it. And so they used to have what they'd call the idiot sets, which would be 12 or 13 people, everybody that wanted to sit in, all playing together on the intermission, on our intermission. And in fact, it was during one of those idiot sets that I heard this clear, concise, cool, and warm guitar voice one time, and I introduced myself to the guitar player and got his phone number, and it was Jim Hall.
I thought you were going to say that.
Yeah.
Was there any prejudice towards her that you knew of down there towards women and
Well, I'm sure she felt that more than she spoke about. Of course there was. There's always been sexism and racism, all the isms, But I've always felt that there was less of those isms in the jazz world than in the world at large. But, of course, still, we just heard a song the other night by a singer on the car radio. Wish I could remember her name, but she'd written a song that she did called something like "Good for a Broad."
Oh yeah, Good.
Somebody had said
Play
that.
well for a girl.
Yeah. That never came up with Lorraine. Never came up in my mind. She played good for anybody, and I happen to.
Can you tell the difference? Do you think between a
when I hear by hearing a person? No, I
piano?
absolutely can't. I absolutely can't. Jessica Williams has fooled me, and I think Mary Lou Williams would have fooled me if I hadn't known her playing from the beginning.
What about Mary McPartland? Would she have fooled you?
Mary McPartland is such an individual. I can tell her by other things. It doesn't have to do with the fact that she's a woman. She's gone through several eras and mastered all of them. And she's the only one I know who can play a Dixieland phrase correctly, really phrase like her former husband Jimmy McPartland, It's a different kind of phrasing. And then go into a bebop phrase and do that right. And then go into something totally free. And no, I could absolutely not, unless I knew her playing, before hearing her recordings. I couldn't tell that it was a woman. Nat Adderley told us one time that his brother Cannonball had said that he could tell whether a player was black or white by listening to him. And so Nat gave him a blindfold test, and he was wrong 3 times out of 5.
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I believe... The music itself has no gender or color. It's out there.
The reason I ask is that Mel Lewis disagrees with you in that late Mel Lewis in Cage's interview, and he said he could always tell when a woman was playing, except for Lorraine.
Oh, okay.
And that's the reason I ask you that question.
That was a way of complimenting Lorraine, I suppose.
Yes,
but if he were still alive, I would challenge him. There was a lady named Sylvia something in New York. I can't remember her last name. Played something like Bud Powell, and I would dare Mel Lewis or anybody to listen to her and say that's a woman. I don't believe he could have.
Talk a little bit about her personality and Lorraine's personality. You said that she was always up. And
she was fun to be around. She was a lot of fun. She had a great sense of humor. She was profound. She wasn't just silly. I mean, she was. She had definite opinions. I remember when we started with our quartet, there was another drummer who I'd played with whom I had played, with whom she had played too, among other places in this strip club, Duffy's, I think. And I wanted the quartet to be unanimous about everybody that was in it. I asked her and James Clay to vote on drummers one day, and she just laughed at me. Between Billy Higgins and him, are you kidding? You know. So I got, and James was with her on that, and I was too, really. It's just that the other guy was very nice and had put in time with us, and I wanted to make sure it just wasn't my own affinity for him that made the choice, you know.
Did you hear a lot of classical playing in her style? I mean, classical background. Could you?
Not as such.
Because just from people I talked to in Portland, they said that she spent quite a few hours just practicing Bach and exercises. And I was just wondering if that was noticeable to you.
No, I don't think that's noticeable in her playing. It certainly isn't noticeable in Joe Zawinul's playing, and he can play very good classical music. I think Joe Zawinul, I think one of the reasons Cannonball maybe hired him is I think that's one of the guys that fooled him.
When I met Herb and
excuse me, and Victor Feldman was another one.
That's right, Victor Feldman.
And you know, you couldn't tell from Victor Feldman's playing whether he was white or black or Jewish or English.
Did you know about Lorraine being the house pianist at the Lighthouse? Did you know that? Did you hang out there? Was that?
Well, we played there with our group.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and she played there with several other groups. I didn't know she had the gig, but I wouldn't. It doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me at all.
That was one of the most talked about, popular clubs probably of all time.
Oh yeah, right.
The Lighthouse.
Yep.
It surprised me because Portland, I don't even think acknowledges that she is a resident. You know, unless I had done that article, they would have never known. They'd forgotten all about her.
Really, that's.
And that was quite a tribute for her to be a house pianist at a place that was so popular, where she was going to meet hundreds of musicians. Miles Davis sat in with her. I have a couple of recordings with Lighthouse with Chet Baker and Howard Rumsey, who, no wonder you didn't get to play with Howard.
No, I didn't.
Howard was there all the time.
Yeah. I must say I was always made to feel welcome there, because Howard was not the favorite bass player of most of the players.
That's what I understand.
Whenever I'd walk in, they'd say, "Hey, sit in," you know, or any other bass player.
At the end of this article, I talked a little bit about her being so self-conscious about her looks. Did you notice that, or did you get any idea?
Well, I don't think that was her problem any more than it's my problem. Looks count, and I'm going to write a song about that someday, because I think I finally figured out why. And she wasn't, as she said herself, her eyes were okay, her nose was okay, her mouth was okay. Put them together, she wasn't what you call a striking beauty. But in this picture here, I think she looks great.
Yeah, she does.
And
I have her for your. Might get a kick out of this. Those are the notes from the. God, they're all coffee stained and everything, but those are the notes from the album.
Yeah.
And look at this. Look what I found in the Washington High yearbook.
I'll be darned. Well, she looks very pretty in there, doesn't she?
Yes. So I could never understand that. That's why.
Yeah. Well, she was kind of tall and bony, and I don't think she and I ever talked about that or about my feeling about myself either. I was the most ugly kid in the school, and when I went to school, I was really the last one chosen for teams and
teams. What kind of teams?
Oh, even athletic teams. I mean anything. It looks count. I'm telling you. If you've
Apparently,
never,
I'm waiting for this song to be.
Yeah. If you've never experienced that, you can't know. But what it is to be ugly, what it is to be considered ugly by the other kids.
Did you really feel that you were considered an ugly duckling?
I did not only felt it, I knew it. It was a fact. It wasn't just a feeling. It was. I looked like a little half a Huckleberry Finn, big teeth and freckles and red hair and.
It's a nice picture of you on that introducing. You look so wholesome and so Norman Rockwell-like on that introducing Red Mitchell, the one on Contemporary that she's on.
Presenting,
Presenting.
The one with the cat.
The cat running up and down.
Well, that picture was retouched by the photographer. He didn't know anything about me, or for that matter, jazz itself. He was told to go to this house and take a picture of a guy named Red Mitchell, and he thought to himself before he left, Red. Okay, so he took a pair of red suspenders with him, which he made me put on. I've never worn suspenders before or since. And he painted my hair really red. Since then, I've run into a lot of people that said, "What happened to your hair? It's not red like it used to be." It never was red like that. He really painted it like bright orange.
Yeah, that's what.
And I had two big teeth in front, but he combined them into one tusk, if you can remember the picture.
Well,
I had freckles, which he brought out. He really retouched that picture. And I'll never live it down. And the worst part is that it's a good record. I still like it. So it'll probably be selling all the rest of my life.
Well, it's out on compact disc now, too.
Yeah, right.
I saw it in the store.
Yeah, I still like the record, unfortunately.
Do you know anything about her playing with Shorty Rogers or the big band things that she did? Was that...
Not specifically. I know she did.
Was she in demand, would you say? And if she was, how come she's not on more records?
Yeah. There you go. Well, there's where the evidence of the discrimination comes in. I think she was underrated.
Nobody knows about her now.
No, I think she was enormously underrated.
Yeah, underrated is the right. She's almost never existed. I mean, because even in that Giola book and then another one, the Gordon book, that I looked in I didn't read the Giola. I think that's the way you pronounce it. I didn't look. I looked in the index, and he just had a couple of lines about her. In the Gordon book, there's a couple of pages about your quartet, and I think her relationship with Herb. But other than that, you don't hear about Lorraine Geller. Nobody would know who she is.
No, that's right.
And yet, for someone who is able to be a house pianist at the White House, and be there. And be in L.A. at a vibrant time, I think, when there's a lot of activity. And I think I even mentioned that in there, that what a place to be in the early 50s, when West Coast jazz, when really L.A. was the center of jazz for a while.
That's right.
And it was put down for that on people on the East Coast, and you had this so-called division between East and West Coast. But I'm just wondering, how come she isn't more well-known? Why isn't she on more records?
Yeah. I wondered that about quite a few other people. Carl Perkins, for example. He was a giant. And he only made one album under his own name.
Yeah.
And I was just talking to Leroy Vinegar about him. And Leroy and I were two that did appreciate him. We loved him. And Billie Holiday loved him. Why he wasn't better known, I'll never figure out. He drank a lot, but I mean, so did a lot of other people.
Did she have any vices that? Well, let me ask you just, and this isn't. In fact, if you want, I can stop the tape.
Yeah, well, I'd just rather not discuss that. First of all, because I don't really know, and
what about her? You don't want to discuss what her. Was her? And I'll shut this.
I did tell you a story about what Rosie told me, my second wife, had happened when Herb and I were hanging out in New York. He was there with Benny Goodman, and I was there with Andre Previn, and Lorraine had called Rosie. However, just recently, my mother told me some things that Rosie had told her recently that were so bad that my mother wouldn't even tell me what they were.
So you're doubting the credibility then?
I'm doubting the credibility. I suddenly realized that's my only source for that story is Rosie.
Mm-hmm.
I got to work with Philly Joe later, and I didn't want to play detective with him and ask him, was it true what happened, I was working with him, and it was a very touchy relationship because he was going out and getting high every intermission, and every set depended on what he hadn't done just before it, all week long.
Now you're talking about serious high, not just smoking.
Yeah. I'm talking about hard drugs.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't about to ask him what his drug habits were years earlier. He wouldn't have even told me what they were that week, And we were playing together. So I didn't want to create a confrontational relationship with Philly Joe Jones.
No.
Not while working with him, anyway. It was a pleasure to me. I loved the whole week. The last set was funny. The last set of the week, he did a little too much of something. He got a little too far over the weather. And he asked Kenny Washington to sit in, who is a student of jazz, including jazz history. And
oh, I didn't know that.
yeah, Kenny Washington is a brilliant drummer and a serious student of everything that's happened before he came along. And he sat in and played Philly Joe Jones better than Philly Joe Jones would have played Philly Joe Jones. But the funny part was that Philly Joe Jones then went up and outscatted John Hendricks. Wiped him out. That was the very last set of that week, so I wouldn't have had it any other way.
Now, where was this?
This was at the Blue Note
Oh.
in New York. Anyway, I'd rather not comment on Lorraine's private life, because as far as I was concerned, working with her, it never, ever interfered with the gig. Unless it helped, which I seriously doubt, but never, ever interfered with the gig. Yeah, I don't know. As I say, that story from Rosie, now I don't know what in the world she's been telling my mother, but as I say, it was so bad my mother didn't even want to tell me what it was. So I don't even have anything to deny,
Well, I put, I think in the article, pulmonary arrest or something.
Well, I think the official medical, I think the autopsy said something about an aneurysm, a particular kind of aneurysm peculiar to tall women. And it might have been that, as far as I know. I've heard more recently that there is such a thing.
When I think about her, it's hard to imagine that. It doesn't seem like Herb Geller would be the kind of guy that she would marry. Because he's so, he impressed me as kind of a real straight, upstanding kind of a guy who, very gentle and, in fact, he doesn't really remind me of a jazz musician. I mean, if there's any, then there isn't a stereotype, but he just seems like the kind of guy who wouldn't be a jazz musician.
Well, I don't really know, Bob, but I have the feeling that Herb and Lorraine together might have been into something before I met them, and cleaned up from it, and that Herb has the rest of his life been super straight.
Yes, definitely.
I know Herb now better than I knew him then. Of course, we've both been over in Europe, and Herb has all along been a helper of other people. He helped Scott DeFaro, for example. During the time that Scotty stayed at their house and rented a room, I think Herb helped him with the standard tunes, the chords, to a degree that he hasn't been given credit for. And I think it was during that time that Scotty went from good to great. And then it was Herb who brought Scotty to New York to join Benny Goodman.
Oh, really?
Later, yeah. And Scotty had his strings so low at that time that he wasn't getting much volume out of the bass. And Benny Goodman waved him out after half a rehearsal or half a tune, whatever it was. Benny had to wait. If he didn't give you the ray, he could just wave you out, and that was it.
Your career right there.
Yeah. And then there he was in New York without a gig, and Herb took him down to the Village Vanguard, and they hung out with Bill Evans, and that's when Bill Evans met Scotty. It was Herb that introduced them.
I remember Scott LaFaro being with Buddy Morrow a long time. I don't know if you remember.
Really? Big band?
In fact, he's on a Mercury recording, The Wind and the Rain in Your Hair.
Really?
Yeah, he takes a solo on there.
With
I
Buddy
interviewed
Morrow.
Buddy Morrow, and he told me that he had Scott LaFaro, and he said he didn't appreciate him as much as maybe he should have.
Well, Scotty and I had a story. He was kind of a protege of mine in the 50s. He used to come around wherever I was working and ask a million questions. He never studied with me, but he always showed up and always asked a lot of questions, and I would try to answer them. And then at one time, I had a chance to buy one of two basses in 1956. I didn't have enough money for both of them, so they were both from the store of Maury Stein, who had the store next to the Union at that time, across the street from the Union later. And that was the real Union. That was the real hangout place. Maury Stein was a dear friend to everybody.
There's a joke or a song about him. He's part of the lyrics of something. I forgot what tune it is now.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I wish I'd have written it. He was really one of my dearest friends. He was so nice that he let me have these two basses for 6 weeks. It took me 6 weeks to make up my mind. One cost $600 and the other cost $750. And I didn't have $1,350, or I'd have bought them both. I wound up choosing the larger one, which was a big lion's head bass. And the other one, which was a Prescott, I gave back to Maury. And right about that time, Scotty was looking for a bass, and I suggested that he go and look at this one, the Prescott, and he did and bought it, and that was his bass. That's the one he died with.
Oh.
He fell asleep at the wheel later, and the bass was half burned up. And the same guy who had originally rebuilt it for him, Colstein in New York, then rebuilt it after the accident. He had, well, not rebuilt it. He had gone over the bass, put on a new fingerboard and bridge and strings and sound post and everything. And the last time I saw Scotty, he was really happy with it. Colstein had reworked it, I guess you'd say. And Scotty came out with Stan Getz to the Renaissance. And he was so happy with the Prescott, he knew it. He knew I had loved it, and he wanted me to play it. So he asked me to sit in and play a set with Stan. And Stan asked me at the same time to sit in for a different reason. He said, I can't hear this guy. Maybe if you play, I can hear you, you know.
Is this before the Benny? This is before the Benny Goodman.
Before the Benny Goodman story, I think, yeah. And so I sat in, and he had the strings so low that I just almost couldn't find them on the fingerboard. They were just right down to the board. So they couldn't hear me either. And he wasn't using an amplifier. And as I said, well, he was going for tone and speed and the music, you know. We're not really married to the instrument, we're married to the music. And how he sounded on records was one thing. How he sounded in person was an entirely different thing.
Where did he get this way of playing so free with having some kind of a floating way and weaving in and out and playing like a horn or another guitar almost?
Mm.
You know, and extending the range. And
well, he was working on that.
Was he the first to do that?
I don't think he was the first, but I think he was the first to develop it into an identifiable style. And he and I used to talk about that kind of thing. Mingus was also into that kind of thing at the time. but not as deep as Scotty got into it. And I know for a fact that Bill Evans and Paul Modian were into it before they met Scotty, because I heard them, Hampton Hawes and I together heard them in Chicago when they were playing with Tony Scott.
Oh, I have some of those early recordings.
Do you? Uh-huh. Well, Tony, maybe you can remember who the bass player was.
Milt Hinton, sometimes.
Well, okay, it wasn't Milt when we saw them. It was some other good, straight-ahead 4/4 bass player, African-American guy. I think it might have been, well, I shouldn't say. I don't remember. But it was a good walking bass player, and not Milt Hinton. I knew Milt Hinton well by that
Grimes?
time. Might have been Henry Grimes.
That sounds familiar. I've
Yes.
got those recordings.
Yeah, that's who I think it probably
I think it
was,
was, yeah.
Henry Grimes. But Paul and Paul Modian and Bill, in this context, the quartet context with Tony Scott, were already into their more modern way of playing, and Hampton Hawes and I just dropped our jaws.
I think of it as simultaneous conversation.
Yeah, it was like that.
Like this. And
Yeah.
listening out.
And I just made a record with a trio in Stockholm with a tenor, bass, and piano trio, which we called Evolution, with an eye to evolving the way of playing with that kind of trio, the way Bill Evans evolved the way of playing with piano, bass, and drums.
I guess we're getting away from Lorraine here, but I
Yeah.
keep thinking one question provokes another. I was thinking about Sonny Rollins doing that, or playing without a piano with
Yeah, it was
remember those?
Shelley and Ray Brown.
and also Elvin Jones and Wilbur Ware, I think, and
Yeah.
those recordings in New York.
Yeah, a lot of people have been working on that. It just really came together with Scotty and Bill and Paul Modian. And I think for the rest of his life, Bill missed Scotty. He had other bass players with him. He asked me to be with him at one point. In fact, I did play with him 4 nights at Shelley's Club one time.
With
Just-
Bucker?
No, just as a duo. Bill just wanted to do a duo. It became my job to ask Shelley to lay out in his own club. And he was nice enough to understand that. But,
Well, they play well together, Shelley Man and Bill Evans. I've got them on 2 recordings, Simple Matter of Conviction and that one they did in the Armory with Monty Budwig was on there.
yeah.
They
But
sound good together.
Well, they did, but Bill had the same objection to Shelley that I had sometimes, which was as great as he played, and he couldn't have done this if he wasn't listening closely. He would listen closely to the story being told by whoever was playing a solo, and listen and listen and listen, and then when you got to your punchline, he'd come in first and wipe it out.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he'd
Sort
tell
of
his
upstage then, huh?
his punchline. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
he used to do that sometimes, and.
Uh-huh.
Bill felt the same about that as I did,
Yeah.
and we really both wanted to work as a duo in his club, even though he had the drums set up. And he came and played with us the first set. Bill didn't like a confrontation, and so he let me do that, and he kind of assigned me to do that. And I did. And Shelley was so nice, man. He was creative enough to understand that both Bill and I were going through a change at that time. That was just before I changed the tuning of the bass to fifths. I was playing on a 5-string bass, and I had the strings low, not as low as Scotty had them, but too low to really be practical with a drummer.
I was going to try to get back to Lorraine.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, excuse me. That's what we're here.
Was she? No, this is fascinating, but I try to stick to my main subject here.
Yeah.
Did Lorraine practice quite a bit? Was she one of those people that would she study on her own? Do you think she was? Would she be one of those kind of people like?
I think she did. I think she studied with Sam Sachs, if I'm not mistaken.
Who's he?
He was a teacher in Los Angeles. Hampton Hawes went to him for a while.
For what reason would you go to a guy like that?
Well, I remember for sure she studied with Sam. Sam used to come in and hear us to check her out on the gig. I don't know exactly, because I heard Sam play and I thought Lorraine played much better. I don't know why she went to him. It was some kind of technical reason, I guess.
Just maybe for exercises and that kind of thing.
I really don't know. It might have been about learning tunes, but she could get that much better from Herb. I don't know. Why?
Did she have any other interests that you knew of? Because this is something I haven't even talked about. It's all been music in there, but was she interested, for instance, in sports, or was there anything else in her life?
If she were interested in sports, we wouldn't have talked about it because I never have been since my youth.
I was going to say, you weren't chosen.
Yeah. Well, no, only that I was ugly. I couldn't throw a ball either or catch one.
Well, how about now?
No, zero. Zero. Can't hit the broadside of a barn, you know.
Was she interested? Was she the kind of? Here's what I want to know: is some musicians are totally all music, and I've written about a number of them.
Yeah.
Where everything is music. I mean,
Yeah.
they can't even. I wrote about Tommy Todd, for instance. Did you know about Tommy Todd?
I know the name. I don't think
He's
I
from
knew.
Portland too.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
Let's see, how would you know? Well, he was an MG. He had that MGM gig before Andre Previn had it. He was just the piano player for the MGM orchestra, and he wrote all.
Tommy
about,
Todd, really?
Yeah.
What years?
45, I think.
I
He got
see.
fired. Very erratic personality and
Oh really? Uh-huh.
total genius, but.
I didn't know about him. That's funny, because I did. That was my job from '59 on till I left MGM Orchestra.
Oh, you did?
Mm-hmm.
Well, he was in some of those movies, in fact. He's in
Yeah.
I got The Killers the other night. He's the piano player in that.
I'll be doing. Well, to answer your question about Lorraine, I think.
Let me ask you this: What would she know who the? Would she be up in current affairs, or I mean, would she know anything about?
Yeah, I think so. I think she was up on current
So
affairs.
she read the paper, in other words.
I think so. Yeah, I don't think she was deeply political, but I think she kept up with what was going on, and
Did you ever know her to talk about anything? What would she talk about besides music?
well, we talked about a lot of things. I don't remember specifically, but to answer your question about her playing, I think she was not the kind of person who sounded like she practiced a lot or sounded like she had studied classical music. She was a natural, I would say. She was a natural. She played as though she'd never had a lesson in her life. Or you can put it the other way, if she did study it, she didn't study enough to hurt her playing. You know, you wouldn't hear, she didn't have that stilted time feeling that some classical musicians have when they try to play jazz. You know, she really swung. She was a real, honest-to-God, natural jazz musician.
Boy, she just doesn't seem like she'd be from her upbringing and where she lived and her parents and everything. It's just
It's funny how that occurs sometimes in people. You wouldn't expect.
Was
it
she
to
interested
occur.
in food? Was that a big? Cooking or?
I don't think she was particularly interested in any part of housework. I don't think
Not
she was.
domestic.
She was not particularly a housewife, a natural housewife. She's much more of a natural piano player than a housewife.
Did she ever yearn to have kids? Was that something that was
Well, I know when they had Lisa, she was thrilled and delighted.
Yeah.
She was really happy. Then Lisa was the center of her life, for a while there.
Tell me about her, if you know, what were her dislikes? Her pet peeves, things that...
Well, phony people, I think, would be first on that list. She was for real. And
people are putting on airs, you mean? Or,
yeah. Or people who talked a big game and couldn't back it up or something.
Like a musician who, says he's great and made these records. And
yeah. There was one guy in Los Angeles who got some kind of a grant to make an album, and he hired me, and I deeply regret that I went for it. And he hired a lot of the best people in Los Angeles, and he used to go
for an orchestra or
for recording. Yeah, recordings paid the best, so a lot of us just said, okay, just 3 hours, go in and do. And he used a lot of the best-known musicians. And he would also go around from club to club and sit in and have his picture taken with these well-known musicians. And he's the guy that Lorraine said, no, 1,000 times no. That was one of her pet peeves, if you ask about that. I think she was even mad at me and Herb. I think Herb went for it too, recording with him.
How was her death received around Los Angeles? Was it a big funeral? Was it a...
It was totally unexpected, as you might imagine.
Yes.
She was so vital. It just, as I said, we were out of town. Herb and I were out of town at the time. I guess.
He was in New York, wasn't he?
Yeah, he must have flown right back, I guess. I don't know. I don't remember. I think I was there for a while more. I don't think I was in Los Angeles. There must have been a service or something. I'm sure. But I think I was out of town when that happened. I'm not sure. I should ask Herb about that. Well, Herb really doesn't like to talk about it much.
Not her death, no.
No.
Did you play with her in a variety of contexts, or mostly was it just trios? Were you ever in?
It was mostly the quartet that we had together.
And the one with Herb, that one that album.
And the one with Herb, yeah. And then the.
Did you play in big bands with her, for instance?
No, I don't think I ever played in a big band with Lorraine. I played in big bands in the studios, you know, bunches of freelancers.
Can you give me an example of her sense of humor? How did it go?
Well, I remember one time. I just remember one time she couldn't. Well, she was really funny. She had a great sense of humor. I can tell you this about it: that Lenny Bruce used some of her lines.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And my second wife, Rosie, too. She was funny. Lenny would use some of her things too sometimes. They worked together, you know, at Duffy's, and she really was funny. I just remember one thing about. She was always looking for her glasses. She always lost her glasses. You know, she had these little pince-nez glasses, you know, and she really got mad one time, and she said, "God damn it, I'm going to go to an optometrist and have another pair of glasses made just to find my glasses."
Was she into clothes? Was that something that was important to her? Dress, getting dressed up.
I don't think she was particularly into that. I know she used to. I learned the adhesive tape trick from her. You get this wide roll of adhesive tape and put it around your hand and take lint off your clothes. You know, that thing. But I don't think that was particularly important.
So she wasn't fashion conscious or anything?
I don't think that was particularly important to her, no.
Yeah.
Later they came out with these rollers, you know.
That's right.
But this was before the rollers.
I remember those.
Yeah.
Could she play anything else besides the piano?
I don't think I ever heard her try. I'm sure she could have. I just don't think I ever heard her try. You could ask Herb about that.
Did you think she listened a lot to... was she one of those people who were always listening to records and
I think she,
trying to get maybe some other ideas? Was she influenced at all by... Or is this too early? This might have been too early. Did she ever hear Bill Evans, for instance, that you knew about? And would that have made a difference on her style, as it did in so many other cases?
I didn't ever hear that make a difference in her playing myself. I know that when Bill Evans started to get famous, she was still alive, and she probably liked him. I know that she and Herb used to listen to records at home all the time.
Who were some of her favorites, do you remember, piano players?
Well, I remember Herb and Lorraine turning me on to Cannonball's group. They were the first one to turn me on to Cannonball's group.
Oh, yeah?
When he first came out. And I think it was Joe Zawinul, if I'm not mistaken. No, I'm not sure.
It couldn't be.
No,
when they first came out.
No, it was that first record with Sam Jones and
let's see,
Nat and Julian, and Louis Hayes, I believe.
And Junior Mance played with him for a while.
Was he the first piano player?
One of the first. And that one they did on Savoy, Bohemia. After that, I had Horace Silver on. He wasn't a regular
Well, maybe that was the one. It might have been that one at Bohemia. I'm not sure. The first
That's
time.
where he got his start. That's when he came up from Florida.
Yeah.
And he sat in at the Bohemia.
Yeah.
And knocked everybody in New York out.
Yeah.
That was a big